Is the 270 Winchester dead? And did the 6.5 PRC kill it? Today we're going to find out, so buckle up. Hello everybody, welcome back to the LocaCarnivore. We're glad you could join us today. Like we said in the hook, the big question today is the 270 Winchester dead? And if it is, did the 6.5 PRC kill it? So where do we get the idea of this notion that the 270 Winchester is dead? It seems to be out there. People are shooting it, taking game with it as we speak. So what happened? Did it happen? Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to give you the full answer, the final answer at the end of the video, so make sure you stick with us. So where on earth did I get the notion that the 6.5 PRC is going to kill off the 270? Well, it comes from the fact we did a video a little while ago, and we'll put the link down in the description, or you can just wait till the end of the video. It'll be on the end screen as well, and you can just go straight into the video. But we looked at the top 5 modern deer cartridges, in other words, cartridges that were developed and have come out since the year 2000. And we compared that to some stalwart, old school, traditional deer cartridges, one of which we looked at was the 6.5 PRC, and we compared it to the 270 Winchester, but only for the 130 grain, which is the traditional deer load for both of those calibers, is a 130 grain. So that's kind of where we got the basic idea. But we wanted to look at the whole thing, you know, as is the 270 better than the 6.5 PRC, etc., based on all the major bullet weights that they use, and look at its use for, you know, deer-sized animals and then up through heavier game like elk and moose and bear and things like that. So that's where we got the notion, and that's why we're doing this comparison. Also, while you're at it, don't forget to give us a big like, give us a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe. We'd love to have you on the LocaCarnivore team, and make sure you ring that bell so you'll get notified of every new video. And I'm going to start off, I'm going to have a piece of paper in front of me because I need to have the notes. I don't have a separate computer and do all this fancy stuff. Don't have a teleprompter. Hey, if you want me to have this stuff and make better quality videos, go down in the description, go to the link to our Patreon, show us some love, and if I get some more budget, I can buy more equipment and do fancier stuff for you. So it's your choice. Moving on though, let's go ahead and look at starting with the 130 grain loads. And what I found was I went and looked at commercially available over-the-counter factory ammunition. Yes, the hand loaders can outdo the factory ammo, no problem. I get that. Just get over it. We're going to talk about what the average hunter is going to go out and buy off the shelf and get the job done with every fall. So let's look at the 130s, shall we? For the PRC, the 6.5 PRC, I found a 130 grain load from Federal, and I've got a mix of different brands here. I don't have any brand deals with anybody. I'm not a shill for anybody. I don't have any sponsors. So it's just what I picked and what looked like the best kind of example for each one of these things. I'm going to look at the 130 load, the 130 grain, and that was the Terminal Ascent bullet, which is their Federal's new bullet. They came out with it a few years ago. It's basically an upgraded Gen 2 version of their trophy bonded tipped bullet, and it's more accurate supposedly, and you know, blah blah blah. This has a ballistic coefficient of 0.532. All these BCs are going to be G1, not G7, but G1 BCs. You can find the G7s out there if you want to go look them up. That's your business. And it has a sectional density, say that carefully without getting in trouble with YouTube, a sectional density of 0.629. And sectional density, just to remind anybody who is not familiar with these terms, that is a dimensionless coefficient which describes a bullet's ability to penetrate. And the closer you get to 0.300 and above, those types of bullets have very good penetrating qualities, and they are going to be useful for larger game animals. So you're going to find in this bullet category, and it's a function of the bullet weight versus the cross-sectional area. You can go look up the formula if you want. But basically, just keep in mind, 250 through about 0.27, 0.28, that's generally typically used for medium-sized game like deer. And above that, especially 0.300 on up, that's the kind of sectional density you're going to want for elk and moose and bear and things like that, big heavy critters, because you want that extra penetration. Enough of that. So let's look at the 6.5, and this one has an advertised velocity of 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle, which is an energy of 2598. 2,598 foot-pounds of energy. So 3,000 feet per second, 2598. That's almost 2,600 foot-pounds, which is pretty darn good. That's a pretty good thumping round right there. And then we're going to look at the velocity and the energy at 400 yards, and then the drop at 400 yards for each of these loads with a 200-yard zero. That'll level the playing field. It makes it easier to compare. Your mileage may vary on anything else. So at any rate, 400 yards on the 6.5 PRC, we're at a velocity of 2324 feet per second and 1558, which is almost, that's pretty good, almost 1,600 foot-pounds, which is still pretty good. Just as an aside, my minimum energies that I like to see, impact energies for deer, is at least 1,200 foot-pounds, and for elk, a minimum of 1,500 foot-pounds. So right off the bat, this 130 grain load, even though it doesn't have as high an SD as I would like to see on a heavy elk, for deer would be great. The drop is 18.4 inches, which is very usable. That's a very flat trajectory as things go. Now let's move over to the 270, shall we? This time I found a 136 grain Federal Terminal Ascent. I tried to keep the bullets matched up as much as I could. This has a BC of 0.493, which, while it's quite a bit less, you really have to get out to about 0.050 difference in BC before you get a significant change in trajectory. And you're going to see that borne out here in just a second. So we have a sectional density of 0.252. Not the best, but it's still in that 0.250 on up range. So it's perfect for deer. And again, it's traditional load for deer. 3,000 feet per second, again, identical velocity. However, we got a little more energy, 2718. That's courtesy of that extra 6 grains of bullet weight. Shows you how much important bullet weight is. Moving out to 400 yards, 2274. So we're at about 50 feet per second less because of that slightly lower BC. But our energy is very similar, 1562 foot-pounds compared to that 1558. And the drop, 18.8. So 4/10 of an inch. You're not going to notice that in the real world with a real gun, with just your average Joe hunter behind the trigger. Trust me, you'll never notice the difference in that kind. So I would call these two loads almost identical as far as their exterior ballistics go. Moving on to the 140 grain, roughly, range. Now, in the 6.5 millimeter calibers, you're going to find it's a 143 grain is the typical bullet weight. And then we have a true 140 grain for the 270. The 143 grain bullet that I found chose to use for comparison for the 6.5 PRC is the Federal again, but they're loading the Hornady ELD-X, which is extreme low drag. X stands for expanding, so it's their game bullet as opposed to their match bullet. And that has a BC of 0.625 and a sectional density of 0.296. So we're moving up. We're knocking on that door of 0.300 on sectional density. Big advantage of 6.5 bullets. They have very high sectional densities. They're very efficient bullets aerodynamically as well. Out the muzzle at 2,900 feet per second. Energy of 2,970. So, correction. Energy of 2,670, 2,670 foot-pounds. So that's a little more than the 130 grain, mainly because of the extra bullet weight, and even though the lesser velocity. At 400 yards, that higher BC really helps it hold its speed at 2330 feet per second. And since it's a slightly heavier bullet, we still have higher energy at 1724 foot-pounds. Drop, 19 inches. So we're talking about an 1.5 inches lower drop than the 130 grain load. The 130 grain load, still a pretty good load. Shoots flat, hitting harder. So that's a good load. Compared to the 270, 140 grain, Federal's loading and offering the Berger hybrid bullet, which Berger's kind of its own little world, and I'm not going to bore you with the details, but basically they pioneered the thing of using essentially a match bullet for hunting with varying levels of success. I've talked to people that love them, and I've talked to other people that have found them abysmal performers when they hit the animal flesh, particularly if it's a closer in shot. The bullet's designed to slow down and be at a lower velocity when it hits because it's very fragile. This hybrid's supposed to kind of bridge the gap, and I don't know a lot about it. You might want to do some research, but according to Berger, that's kind of going to give you still the match accuracy, but better terminal performance on game. So that's their opinion. BC on this 140 grain 270 load, 0.528, which is quite a bit less actually than the 6.5, and then a sectional density of 0.259. Not a real big increase in sectional density, even though we've gone up 10 grains in weight. And of course the 6.5 has outpaced it in sectional density by quite a bit, but it's still quite adequate for deer. I don't know if I would consider it an elk weight with that sectional density, but people have used it. Velocity, 2950 feet per second. So it's actually going faster than the 143 grain ELDX 6.5. And our energy is higher because of the higher velocity, 2705, 2,705 foot-pounds. So we've got a little higher energy there, not tons, but a little more. Get out to 400 yards, that BC starts to hurt it. Velocity, 2276, 2,276 feet per second, which is about, what are we looking at, 50, 60 feet per second less than the 143 grain 6.5. Energy is down because the velocity is down, even though, and we also have a little less bullet weight at 1610. Still adequate for elk, quite adequate for deer. And then the drop, 19.1. So it's interesting, you see, even though there's what looks like numerically a pretty large gap in BC, the trajectories still end up being pretty close to the same. The drop's almost identical. What you're losing though with that lower BC is downrange energy retention, downrange velocity retention. So that does lend itself to think about the 6.5 maybe being a little better than the 270. And while you're at it, if you're looking for more content and if you'd like some of this groovy LocaCarnivore merchandise, don't forget to go to the link in our description to our website, LocaCarnivore.com. You can pick up all that stuff, read more stuff, find more videos, and you'll really enjoy it. Alrighty then, let's move into the heavyweights. And in the 6.5 world, that's a 156, and this is, I found, a Burger brand. They're loading their own ammo now apparently too, besides making the bullets. And this is with their Elite Hunter bullet, which again is, they've got a wide variety of bullets. Half the time I wonder if they're just simply rebranding the same bullet, but I'm not going to get into that. If you know more about Burger, go down in the comments and let us know, and you can kind of clear that up for us. Plus, what do you think of what we're doing here? Is the 270 better than the 6.5 or the other way around? Do you use either one? We'd love to hear from you, so go down in the comments and let us know. And don't forget to share the video while you're at it. So let's look at this 156 Burger Elite Hunter. Ballistic coefficient off the chart, 6.79, or correction, 0.679. That is really high BC, and excellent, outstanding sectional density, 0.310. Just to give you a rough point of reference, the 300 grain 375 H&H bullet is a 0.305, and that is renowned as one of the greatest penetrating loads ever developed by mankind. So that's going to give you an idea of how well this bullet should penetrate. So this is your elk load, quite frankly. Out the door, out the muzzle at 2960 feet per second, so it's cooking along pretty good. Outstanding energy, 3,035 foot-pounds. Really good energy. That is elk hitting energy, no problem. Get to 400 yards, that high BC is really pulling. It's hauling the mail at 2427 feet per second, and the energy is still over 2,000 foot-pounds at 2041. So this is outstanding. This would be your elk load, in my opinion, assuming the bullet will hold together if you have to do a closer shot, because you never know what you're going to get when you're elk hunting. Sometimes they're way far away, and other times they're, oh my God, this is right there. So, you know, choose your bullets wisely. However, that high BC, wonderful drop, 17.9 inches. So we're right back at that about 18-inch, foot and a half drop at 400 yards. So that actually has a flatter trajectory than the 143 grain, and it's going to hit a lot harder. Something to think about, but you're going to pay for it in recoil because of that heavier bullet weight. And let's move into the 270 now. Compare that to a 150 grain Nosler brand. It's their bullet and their ammo. They're loading their 150 grain Accubon long range, which is different than their standard Accubon. The Accubon long range has a secant ogive instead of a tangent ogive. It's supposed to be a lot zippier, and it's designed to expand both at close in at higher velocities and not break up, and because it's a bonded bullet. And then it's also, I don't have anything going with Nosler, but I've used their bullets, I like them. And the long range bullet though has a little more frangibleness to it, so that when it slows down, it's supposed to expand even below the traditional nozzler threshold of 1800 feet per second. So it's going to still expand and do its job way downrange. So this bullet goes out the muzzle at 2850 feet per second. So we're down 110 actually feet per second off of that 156 grain 6.5 PRC. So we're down a little bit, and the energy reflects it, 2705. Curious, it's the same energy as that 140 grain, the 270 that we just looked at, and that's just because the difference in velocity offsets the difference in the weight. They kind of balance each other out, but it's a curious coincidence. Now, I forgot to mention the BC on this bullet is 0.591, and that gives you a sectional density of 0.279. So it's definitely in the running. Anything above 0.275, in my opinion, is fine for elk and moose and big critters. So this is over the edge, over the line there, and should qualify for that. Now you get out to 400 yards, and that lower BC really does hurt it compared to the 6.5. We're at 2249, basically 2250 feet per second, which is still going at a good clip. I mean, you're definitely going to, make an impression when the bullet hits. And at 1684 foot-pounds energy, that's still more than enough for elk. So this is your elk load. You can still use it on deer. Drop, though, because of that lower BC, that way lower BC, comparatively speaking, a lot of drop, 20.2 inches. So that's over 2 inches of drop. Again, in the real world, is that going to make a big difference? The average, again, a regular hunting rifle with the average Joe behind the trigger, I don't think so. I don't think you'd ever miss it. If you're a real, precise shooter with really high-grade equipment and everything like that, it might make a difference when you get way out there, like, 800 yards or something like that. Not recommending you shoot animals at that range, but at that point it would make a difference. But normal hunting environment, it's pretty irrelevant. So we kind of call them equal-ish. However, the 6.5 is definitely leading in the velocity and the energy department, and critically for the big animals, the sectional density. So that's a big plus there for that round. Well, so much for the ballistics and the various bullet weights. Have we answered the question? Is the 270 dead? No, 270 is not dead, and I doubt it's going to die anytime soon. But if it does, will the 6.5 PRC kill it? Again, I don't think so. The two loads are amazingly similar, very similar performance. It's a dead heat in my opinion. And if you like the PRC, get the PRC. If you're a 270 fan, get the 270. So there's our bottom line. 270 is not going away, but the 6.5 PRC is a great alternative if you want to go that route. And I want to thank you for spending your valuable time here with us at the LocaCarnivore. We do appreciate it. And remember, the ultimate act of resistance is insisting upon facts. Thanks for watching.